Hey guys, this is Nicole Van Tassel with I Explore Science, and in this lesson walkthrough, I'm going to be taking you through a lesson called Exploring Atoms and Molecules. Now, the objectives of this lesson are for students to understand that atoms are the basic building blocks of matter and that atoms combine to form molecules. In subsequent activities, students will learn that they will clarify their understanding that atoms can combine in different ways to form different molecules. But through this exploration, they will definitely be walking away understanding that they'll be able to see that atoms can combine in different ways, and they will see that. And they'll learn the terms atoms, molecules, potentially elements when you introduce that as well. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in, and I'm going to walk you through this lesson. So in this lesson, students start by just examining these puzzle pieces that are provided to them. And I asked them to record 10 observations about the puzzle pieces provided. 10 is a lot. It really pushes them. They, start making their basic observations like, here's all the puzzle pieces, and these are cut out. Like there are some have grooves, some are thicker, some are smaller. There are more than one kind. Some connect together, some don't connect. Some connect to 2 pieces, some connect to 3 pieces. I mean, you really have to push to get to 10, but that's the goal, that they're really gonna start thinking and just breaking down their observations. Now, the second task, and that's just the observation. The second task asks the students to create these rectangles, and then they're asked to sketch their combinations right here on their paper. And their goal is like, how many different combinations can you make? So it's kind of a challenge, and you can even make it like a contest. But the goal is that they start to see that different puzzle pieces connect in different ways. So 2 7s can connect with a 4. But if I look at my other puzzle piece, like 1 and a 7, a 1 and a 7 also connect. 2 doesn't connect with anything because it has no little grooves. It would take 3 7s to connect with these 5s up here. So they make these different combinations, and then we get into some other thinking things. So whenever I'm guiding an exploration, I have to think through what my students need to notice. So I needed them to notice that the puzzle pieces combine, because that's the point we're getting at, that these puzzle pieces are atoms. They can combine in different ways to form molecules, which are rectangles. I'm not telling them any of that. My goal is for them to discover it. But I have to give them tasks and questions that help them get there. So this asks to create those puzzle pieces, but I also want them to see that the puzzle pieces don't just all combine. So what puzzle pieces will not combine to form a rectangle? So what are 3 puzzle pieces that don't combine, and explain why these pieces don't fit together. So maybe there's not enough space, like there's not enough, zigzags for them to fit on. For the block 2 right here, there's no zigzags at all. It doesn't connect to anything. So that is, these are the observations and the thinking that I need my students to get through. And I use my questioning to guide that process. Now, ideally in a classroom, if you can be sitting with your students and talking them through every single step of this, that's awesome. But realistically, that's not always possible in our classrooms. So we often have to instead use questions and worksheets like this to guide our students through this process. And then during our explain phase, during our debriefing, we can go through these questions in more of a discussion format. But if you're able to do this as a discussion with them while they're working, that's even better. Now in the next phase, we are getting more into some of the characteristics that I want them to notice. So here's asking them, I want you to pick 2 different puzzle pieces, and I describe unique properties or characteristics. So number 4 and number 7. Number 4 connects to 3 other types of puzzle pieces. Number 7 connects to 5 other types of puzzle pieces. Now we're getting to ideas of like reactivity, but again, we're not using language like that. We're just talking about puzzle pieces and how they connect. Some are smaller, some are bigger, some don't connect to anything, like that number 2 again. We are getting to this idea that each puzzle piece is unique, but all the 4s are the same and all the 7s are the same. So they are going to see that. And then we get in, now this is where like kind of the vocabulary starts to be introduced. As students have developed some of these ideas, now the vocabulary is coming into play. So each puzzle piece represents matter, the smallest particle of matter that retains its unique characteristics, and these particles are called atoms. So I've introduced a term. Again, ideally, there would be discussion happening with your students before this. You've talked out their ideas. You've talked out these ideas. They've told you, like, these puzzle pieces are unique. All the fours are the same, but the fours are all different than the other ones. And you've said, okay, now each puzzle piece represents matter, and then you give them the term. And then you just like walk them through this thinking that there's different types of atoms with different types of properties, that pure substances are made up of only one type of atom, and these are called elements, or that pure substances that are made up of only one type of atom are called elements. So then they can go back and they can look at, well, how many elements were represented by the puzzle pieces in this activity? This would be a time where you could potentially introduce the periodic table. Like, we only looked at, 7 elements, because there were 7 different puzzle pieces, but hey, look how many there actually are in the world. And you're starting to introduce those ideas to students. And then looking at, okay, what did those puzzle pieces do? We were combining them. We combined them to form new substances. How did we model this process? What represented the new substances? It was these vocabulary terms, it was these rectangles. And this is where we could give them the vocabulary term of molecules, and even the vocabulary term down here of chemical bonds. And you are therefore like introducing these vocabulary terms as students are developing their understanding of the actual concepts. So they might not fully understand, chemical bonds, or what is exactly happening, or like what atoms look like in terms of atomic structure and all of that, but they have the general concepts, and they have now the general concept of how these atoms are joining, and that these atoms join in different ways and in unique ways, not willy-nilly, not totally can join with anything else, but they have different properties that allow them to join with specific other elements to form new substances, which are our molecules, which is the whole point of this lesson. And students literally discovered those ideas themselves through this process of like figuring it out and using this like hands-on yet minds-on practice of puzzle pieces. And the vocabulary was integrated into the lesson as the concepts arose, instead of being like front-loaded at the beginning of the lesson. And the lesson goes on to like look at in the real world, like these were puzzle pieces, now let's look at actual elements, and to take it farther than that. But you can always check that out in the Exploring Atoms and Molecules lesson plan. So I hope that gave you a good quick introduction to kind of how I am guiding students through this discovery and exploration process, and how I'm integrating vocabulary actually into the lesson instead of like front loading it, and how you can use this type of instruction and discovery and figuring it out to meet the goals that you need to meet in your classroom, without just simply telling your students vocabulary terms or disciplinary core ideas or any of these things. Your students can do so much more than you might even realize. I know that, my students could do more than I could realize they could, until I started giving them the opportunity to do it. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will catch you guys later.